Arcane Season 2 has finally released. Me and a friend of mine binged all the episodes that we could as soon as they came out, and we had a really great time with it. A lot of people love Arcane, and for good reason. Stellar animation, great storytelling, and best of all, a phenomenal cast of characters. For a lot of people, top of their list of favorites is Jinx, the anti-hero, villain, antagonist. She's kind of complicated, but in essence, she is the driving force for a lot of the show's plot, with her chaos and her trauma and her general fall into what appears to be the villain of Season 2. Though, as I've watched Season 2, I'm kind of starting to question that. Well, we'll see where Jinx's story goes. But yeah, I really love Jinx. She is a great character. And I have no doubt that, like many popular characters out there, Jinx has inspired many a D&D and TTRPG player when they're creating their next player character. But is that a good thing? I mean, just because someone makes a great character in a movie, book, television show, video game, whatever, that does not mean they make a good character in a TTRPG. TTRPGs are games where the needs of a character are definitely different from a book. So, would Jinx from Arcane make a good player character, or would Jinx from Arcane be a problem player in your D&D game? Well, I think it's an interesting question with some nuance to it. So, without further ado, guys, let's get started. Okay, for starters, I think it's good to go over what makes a good D&D character, and there are a lot of things. You can make a whole video on it. I like characters with a really defined aesthetic. I like characters with a good personality around them. A solid foundation for their persona could be their flaws and their connections, the things that motivate them and the things that they love in this world. And Jinx from Arcane, she's a really well-rounded character with a lot of these baseline features. She absolutely has plenty of flaws, bonds, things in this world that she hates and that she loves. She has a very defined aesthetic, an interesting power set that would honestly be kind of fascinating to translate into a game like D&D. And in general, I think those baseline things of a good character, Jinx has all of them. I mean, there's a reason why people love her so much. But beyond those baseline features of what makes a good general character, would Jinx work in a TTRPG specifically? Well, there are some requirements that I think we can just skip right over. Like, for example, I don't think you need to worry about Jinx fitting into the adventure of Arcane. I mean, she is a character that was explicitly written to be in it. She doesn't feel out of place by any means. And if you were to set a campaign in Piltover and Zaun, Jinx would obviously fit right in. She's one of the foundational characters that established that setting, so obviously she fits. But what about motivation? Motivation for adventuring is a huge pitfall that a lot of D&D characters fall into. Like, often you'll see somebody make up a character with a happy home life, a happy family, and then you gotta wonder to yourself, like, okay, why are you here? Like, what's their reason for going out and adventuring? I mean, Jinx is definitely martially capable, but like a guard in the town square who's just doing his job and minding his business, he's martially capable, but that does not mean he has a reason to go out there and adventure. He's perfectly happy just sitting around guarding the town square. So, what's Jinx's reason for adventuring? Well, in Arcane, she actually has a couple, and I think they are all really solid. After suffering a traumatic event that she accidentally caused and being taken in by a drug lord, Jinx works for him for a while before she realizes that her sister, thought to be dead, is actually alive and looking for her. Jinx sets out to go find her. Now, this adventure does not last very long. I think her pursuit of Vi only really lasts a single episode, and the rest of Jinx's story in Season 1 is just dealing with the aftermath of how all that stuff went wrong, which is just... I mean, that's a whole thing. But this initial motivation of find my sister, that's a really good baseline motivation for adventuring. Even better, Jinx's motivation evolves later on. It looks like in Season 2, based on the trailers and based on these first 3 episodes, Jinx is going to become a rallying symbol for the Undercity, rallying the underprivileged people together. And this is a good motivation for a character later on down the line in their story. A lot of players jump right to this second motivation, where you're rallying the people together, the big picture stuff. But most TTRPG games start at a low level. Like most DMs start their campaign at level 3, not level 10 to 20. So the big picture goals, rallying all the people together, those don't really make sense for the level, right? It starts with something small, like finding your sister, and then your goals evolve. Having evolving goals, new goals, those are great for your character. A lot of characters lose steam once they fulfill the initial motivation. You definitely feel this later on down the line in Critical Role Campaign 2. The goals of the Mighty Nine in Critical Role Campaign 2 had to evolve after their initial backstory hooks were all fulfilled. Jinx in Arcane did something similar, and I think this is a really good lesson to learn for your D&D game. So yeah, Jinx has all these great stuff. A defined persona, a solid aesthetic, motivation to join the party, bonds and flaws, loves and hates, all these amazing features that would make a great D&D character, right? Well, Season 1 Jinx also has some problems, and I think we should get into that. Alright, now as I get to these problems, let me make this clear. I'm not talking about problems for Jinx in the show Arcane, alright? Jinx in the show Arcane is amazing, but for a D&D game, there might be some issues. Starting out with, Jinx does not solve problems. She basically exclusively creates one. In Season 2, there's a great quote that she's responsible whether she's pulling the pin or not. And that's a great way to describe Jinx, but could be kind of annoying for player characters. Now let me make this clear. Chaos is a big part of any TTRPG, especially one like Dungeons & Dragons. We're rolling dice for a lot of stuff, and player characters often do cause problems. But look at the most beloved characters in a show like Critical Role or Dimension 20. These characters are trying to solve problems, not going out of their way to create more of them. Jinx in Arcane is largely speaking an antagonist for a lot of characters, even the people she is allied with. She creates a crap ton of problems for basically everybody, stealing powerful arcane resources, causing chaos in both the city of Piltover and the underworld of Zaun, hurting her sister in some pretty traumatizing ways during that dinner scene. All of those things are things that Jinx does, either on purpose or incidentally, though mostly on purpose. And again, while this makes for an incredible character in Arcane, this would not make for a good D&D character. Your DM's job is to be the antagonist, generally speaking. Not to say your DM is evil or anything, but their job is to create problems, to work against you, the player characters. Even when the player characters are the villains, even when they are the bad guys, it's the DM who is creating problems. Having someone on your side that's creating a bunch of issues for you is not fun. It's not just the fact that Jinx is chaotic. That was my initial point while I was writing all this down. I thought to myself, Jinx's problem is the chaos. But again, chaotic heroes, chaotic protagonists, they can absolutely work. Look at someone like Scanlan Shorthalt in Legend of Vox Machina or Critical Role. He is a very chaotic character, but he still solves problems. He just does so in a very chaotic way. Jinx creates problems. That is the issue. It's not necessarily that she's crazy or whatever. It's the fact that she is ruining things for people around her. She's a Jinx. And Jinxes, they don't make for great player characters. Another big problem with Jinx, and this is involved in her chaotic nature, she is not a team player in Season 1, man. My God. I kind of loosely brought this up earlier, at least I'm pretty sure, but Jinx open fires on her own people. She hurts her allies in major ways, antagonizes enemies when she should keep her head down. And again, this ties back to the whole instigator of problems thing, but a character's ability to work with a team is essential to making a good player character. Let me tell you, man, Jinx does not do that. She is a Jinx on the people around her. Like I said earlier, pulling the pin or not. And this creates a lot of problems. There would be a lot of frustration if a character is hindering other people in a major way. Like, it's one thing to roll bad and not help the party because the dice aren't favoring you. It's another thing when you are actively opening fire on your allies. And while I don't think most D&D games go that far, I do think there are people who don't see the problems that they cause at their table by engaging in really instigatory behavior. Like, okay, Jinx in Arcane, she steals a gemstone for her father figure, Silco, and this is really helpful for him. However, it also creates a ton of problems. Like, the whole thing spirals down into nonsense eventually, resulting in Silco's death. Look, that's obviously something that was written for Arcane, a really tragic and poetic, amazing scene. But in D&D, somebody going out of their way to help and hindering instead, that might be frustrating instead of helpful. Look, create characters who are team players. That is so important. Okay, speaking of the whole you're a Jinx thing, the trauma. Yeah, Jinx's story has a lot of trauma. You'll notice that when I was talking about and praising Jinx's character for good reason, I didn't mention her backstory. And Jinx's backstory is really, really good. There's a lot of good elements there. The abandonment, the loss and death of family and friends, these are all traits that you see in a lot of characters. Having a character that's lived with a possible antagonist or big bad evil guy for the campaign, a character that she might turn against in the future, that might be great baseline for a backstory. However, there is an aura of trauma around basically everything involved with Jinx, and this might be really good for your campaign. However, I do want to acknowledge something that I don't think D&D YouTubers acknowledge enough. Okay, come here. So, D&D YouTubers, I hang around them obviously, talk to them, and a lot of us play D&D in a similar way. We have a lot of roleplay, we have a lot of drama and trauma, and all that stuff. That stuff is great. We love serious role-playing and storytelling in our campaigns, but not every campaign has that tone. Look, you'll see a lot of YouTubers talk about how jokes at inopportune times, gags at serious moments, those might ruin the campaign, but I would argue that while those are definitely not great, I would argue that drama and trauma in campaigns and moments where they don't fit can be way, 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 way more awkward. Look, Jinx has a lot of really intense scenes. Nothing that gets into like NSFW territory, but it's definitely not territory that I think every character would like to tread down. I mean, particularly that mental breakdown scene might make people uncomfortable, including myself, who has suffered from mental breakdowns. Look, that scene in Arcane is amazing and really well done, but during my casual D&D time, am I going to enjoy that? Maybe and maybe not. Look, there's nothing wrong with having a character with that trauma in the backstory. It just depends on how you play it at the table with everyone else around you. Like, take Yuumi, for example. Yuumi is one of my beloved characters. You've probably heard me talk about her before if you've been on this channel for a while. She's a character from my 10th Tomb actual play. And in that show, she has a really traumatic and sad story with a lot of abuse and trauma. However, when I brought her into my home game, I leaned more into other aspects of her character. The awkward spy hacker girl angle was much more of the focus. She felt more like a character that would be in a show like Firefly, for example, or even someone in something more lighthearted like Star Wars. I didn't retcon Yuumi's character, I just focus on an aspect away from that trauma because talking about abuse and the things that she went through might not really fit at my home game table, which tends to be a bit more lighthearted. Look, I'm not trying to say that Jinx's trauma is not extremely compelling. Again, I like her backstory a lot, and I think there's a lot you can learn there when it comes to motivating your character. There's a great skeleton you can build off of, but you might want to consult the rest of your party about how much trauma and drama they're willing to sit through, because if they're not comfortable with that, you shouldn't play it out. Okay, so conclusion. Would Jinx make for a good D&D character? Well, generally speaking, if you were to take her one for one, the answer is honestly probably not. She is a problem creator, an instigator of not good things, and instigatory players absolutely can become problem players. Players who play out topics that other people are uncomfortable with, that could become problem player behavior. There is a phenomenal player character in Jinx. You just need to iron out some of the problems before you bring her in. In fact, I think Season 2 might actually be an even better portrayal of Jinx in a D&D game. Jinx in Season 2 is much more of a team player. She is rallying the Undercity, creating her own faction, essentially. And I think that that's really, really interesting for a character, but also, I think this makes Jinx more like a D&D player character. You need to work with other people. And Jinx, I mean, she is definitely trying to cause problems for other people, and I think she's just kind of incidentally solving problems for her allies. But whether or not she means to, she is becoming a solver of problems rather than somebody who causes problems for others. In fact, she directly solves a big problem for her ally Sevika by making her a new arm. Ah man, it's almost like Jinx took my advice, and you know what? That makes me real happy. In any case, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm actually kind of curious what you think about this video concept in general. Would you be interested in me making more of these kind of videos for other popular characters? I'd like to analyze more characters and see how they'd fit into D&D. But anyway, if you have any thoughts, let me know down below. But before you go, you might want to hear me out on this. We got a new episode of RPG Horror Stories. It's linked in the cards. We had a fun little skit making fun of Redditors on the Baldur's Gate subreddit. It was a nice, good old time. Linked up there in the cards. But before you go, please do leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, you can go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, tell me your favorite character in Arcane, or if you haven't watched it, go watch it. What are you doing? It's a great show. But anyway, in essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell. Another big problem with